There are a couple of things. First of all, not very many people could write. Not very many people could read. What used to happen is if you were lucky, your village had one person who could read but not write. And then that person would tell the story. Now, there is something very magical about oral cultures, that someone who can read, someone who can write, and you take a leap of faith. In other words, you trust them. You trust what they are reading. I mean, when you look at the history of writing, it begins with Egypt and cuneiforms. And I don't know if any of you in this class have a journal. I mean, you don't go to your journal and say, today I went and had a croissant. But that's not a very memorable experience. It's stupid. Why the hell would you want to go somewhere and write that I had a croissant? Unless you say, I went to get a croissant, and lo and behold, I saw Eminem walking around naked. Writing happens when you have a profound or memorable experience, negative or positive, painful or pleasurable. And given that not very many people could write in the old world, you have specific people who have specific experiences, and they assume that those experiences are so important that they need to be written down because human memory is fallible. If you don't write, you will forget. You will forget some important parts, and then it's kind of like us. Like you watch something and you all of a sudden, I don't know, you have an inspired moment and you say, I should write this down. We say, no, maybe I'll go home and write it down. And by the time you get home, you realize, well, you've lost about 85% of it. And you say, what the hell was I thinking? What was it again? And then you eventually kind of just get rid of it. It's not important anymore because you've lost the core components of your imaginations. And so what you have when you have an oral culture is you have people who only expose people to things that have value, depth, that have a tendency of inspiring them. Because what you have is, you have life, this is it, the meat of life. Then you have people writing about the spirit of life. That's very, very different. I mean, you and I don't have the time, the luxury, the capacity to live in two worlds. Live in the world of Caesar and then to live in the world of God. I mean, people like Jesus can do that. They can occupy both worlds. But for when Jesus occupies the world of God, when he comes back to the world of Caesar, he seasons it with imagination, with things that are sacred, for him at least, the spiritual stuff. You know, it's like you have this raw piece of meat and then you season it, then it tastes really good. Jesus looks at life and says, chicken, yuck. And then he puts some salt, some turmeric, some onions, some this, some that, and then bakes it. And then you eat and say, this is a life, or this is a chicken worth eating. And so what you have are really, you have 90% of human population who are just busy putting food on the table, remaining afloat, not getting depressed, not becoming angry because society is just mean-spirited. Right? Then you have 10%. For whatever the reasons are, they happen to be in this privileged position in life. Whether God made them this way, whether biology, who the hell cares? But they sit somewhere. They feel things. They think about things. Some of them can go further and feel and think and write things. Some of them go even further. Think, feel, write, and then express everything in a very, very coherent way. So when you read someone like the Buddha, and I say the Buddha because he's like a scientist. He doesn't give you God, he doesn't give you a soul, he doesn't give you a spirit. He says, let me tell you what life is. Let me tell you how desires come about. Let me tell you about what society is and how desires come about. And what this does is it allows you to get to know your psyche really, really, really well. How many people throughout history have done that for us? I mean, Jesus is great, but he's just a novice. He's like a hippie. He gives us these heavyweight concepts and you have no idea what to do with them. All you have to do is just have faith in him, which is okay, nothing wrong with that. But the Buddha makes you see things, man, and that's value. And that's very, very rare. So 95% of human beings, we're just trying to survive. If you read the Gospel of Mark, for example, what you have is Jesus telling his disciples, being with his disciples in a certain way, and then being with the public in a completely different way. He knew the dangerousness of ideas. So he allowed people to kind of just, look, let me give you an example. So in the Gospel of Mark, there's a story about this father. I think it's in the Gospel of Mark. There's a story about this father who has this son who is sick. And he takes his son to Jesus and says, my son has been sick ever since he was born. He destroys things. He screams. He shouts. He's been possessed by Satan. And that's one of the things you need to understand about the old world, that sickness does not come from your body. Sickness does not come from society. Sickness comes from God. If not God, then Satan. And so pain becomes very sacred because it doesn't come from down here, it comes from above. And so anything that comes from above has to be cured from above. Pain directs your attention to God. And so you go to church, you cry, you pray for God to come down and heal you. And so JC looks at the father and says, so you want your son to be healed? Yes. And so he says a few things and he says, Satan, leave him. And then Satan supposedly exits the psyche of this young man and he's healed. And for the first time in his life, he looks at his father and says, Dad, I've missed you so much. Now, Jesus does not tell him, come follow me. He doesn't say become spiritual. He doesn't say seek the kingdom of God. He knows that this father, the only thing he wants is to love his son. And he wants to see his son be healed. That's all. And it's a wonderful thing to see. It's not like Eckhart Tolle and these New Age gurus who come on the stage with thousands of people out there saying, well, everybody can do this. No, leave people alone. Some people need to be angry. It's justified. Anger has a healing quality to it. Not all anger is bad. So the point I'm trying to make is good teachers have a tendency of protecting the public, knowing full well that most people don't have the capacity to seek what they journey towards.